Hey guys, let's get more news about Dallas, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Former NFL head coach makes argument for Cowboys being close and retaining Mike McCarthy. A former Super Bowl winning coach made the argument for Dallas' approach to the offseason following their playoff loss. We are on our fourth week of the offseason for the Dallas Cowboys, and that it began so early frustrating and confusing. In that time, we have pondered a lot of questions and wondered whether or not decisions made were ultimately the best ones. Mike McCarthy is returning for a fifth season with the team and will do so with a third defensive coordinator under his supervision, one still to be determined at the time of this writing. Jerry Jones noted while at the Senior Bowl that the team would have an all-in approach to the offseason, but exactly what that means remains clouded in ambiguity. The frustration we all feel is obviously a result of the Cowboys not achieving the ultimate goal and falling as short as a playoff team can in that capacity. It is frustrating in a different way to point out that they accomplished a lot of good before the bad fell upon them, but that doesn't mean that it is untrue. This week I am in Las Vegas on Radio Row for my show, The Morning Huddle on San Antonio's Sports Star. We will be interviewing people all week long and sharing any interesting Cowboys-related nuggets that come out of them, and on Tuesday we received one from Super Bowl-winning head coach Brian Billick. The knee-jerk reaction is you throw the baby out with the bathwater and we've got to do everything. Well, no. Sometimes it's very subtle. And you have to begin with the idea that, and we're talking about it right now with Kansas City, how hard is it to go back to repeat? It's hard to just win one. The things that have to align for you to go to and win a Super Bowl, a lot of it is fate. Obviously you don't just dismiss it to that because there's a lot of things you've got to do to set yourself up that you create your own luck, so to speak. It's a hard process. Dallas has to look at, they were a good team. They did a lot of good things. But you've got to go back and be very critical about and analyze. Okay. Is there a little something we need to do? If we've got to do a lot of things, then you're talking about a total rebuild, that's a totally different project. But what kept us? What were the strategic things that kept us from getting to the next game? Sometimes it's just, they were a better team. Or they were a better team that day. Kansas City and Baltimore. I think Baltimore's the better team. If you want to try to quantify it, but not on that day. That's the great thing about this game. That 60 minutes is just long enough not for the best team to win, but the team that played best. For the Cowboys, and Jerry's one too, he's going to do it all. I applaud that he kept Mike McCarthy. They'll make some subtle changes along the way because they were close and see if, okay, we've got the elements, we've got to add a few things here and there that happened during the season. But they're not that far off compared to a lot of other teams that boy there's a lot more to do. Coach Billick made the same argument for his old team in the Baltimore Ravens, which reinforced why we all felt the way we did when Baltimore was bounced in the AFC Championship game by the Kansas City Chiefs. He is certainly fair in noting that Dallas should not throw the baby out with the bath water in that they were a 12-win team, for the third year in a row at that, and that perhaps they simply were just not the better team against the Green Bay Packers at AT&T Stadium. Cooler heads should prevail when emotions following a loss are running rampant. But we can talk ourselves in circles by saying that being the inferior team on the most important day is a trend that has followed this team for almost 3 decades, something that separates Dallas from Baltimore in that sense. The Cowboys have the most amazing ability to keep themselves firmly in the mix to where they allow for epic heartbreak after heartbreak without the ultimate payoff. As the playoff loss continues to get further and further in the rearview mirror, it seems that a lot of people nationally are more and more in agreement with Billick in that Dallas made the reasonable decision by keeping McCarthy. You can certainly argue that the reasonable decision happened to line up with the easy one, but just because that is the case does not mean that it was unreasonable. Perhaps this is the reality that we all have to reckon with as the full offseason draws near. Do you feel more accepting of the offseason since it initially began? Has time begun to heal that wound? Or do you still feel like Dallas has gone down a path that they ultimately should have avoided? Cowboys' Tony Pollard was stunned live on air to learn Commanders hired Dan Quinn. There are people who are a little slow to find out news, and then there's Dallas Cowboys running back Tony Pollard. While appearing on ESPN's The Pat McAfee Show on Wednesday, Pollard shared that he had purged all of his social media at one point and learned right then and there that his team's defensive coordinator Dan Quinn not only left the team, but also became the coach of divisional rival Washington Commanders. "I just found out right now," Pollard said Wednesday. "I don't doubt Dan Quinn at all with whatever he's doing. Head coaching, defensive coordinator, whatever it is, he's gonna find a way to get the most out of he guys that he coaches." Quinn took the Commanders' job on Thursday, meaning Pollard somehow hasn't heard the news for the last 6 days. How he managed to stay out of the loop for so long is impressive on some level, but he seemed to handle the news well. Pollard and the Cowboys will go head-to-head against Quinn and the Commanders twice next season in their pair of NFC East divisional clashes. Dallas went 5-1 against Washington in Quinn's 3 seasons as the Cowboys' defensive coordinator. Cowboys to interview Jets Marquand Manuel. The Cowboys added another name to their list of defensive coordinator candidates today, scheduling an interview with Jets safeties coach Marquand Manuel. According to ESPN's Todd Archer, the meeting will take place tomorrow. Manuel started coaching in Seattle in 2012, a few years after concluding his playing career as an assistant special teams coach. He would climb the ladder for the Seahawks, becoming a defensive assistant and an assistant secondary coach over the next 2 years. He took his first position coaching gig as the secondary coach for the Falcons in 2015 and was promoted to defensive coordinator 2 years later. When his contract in Atlanta expired, Manuel was hired as the defensive backs coach in Philadelphia for a year before taking the safeties coach position in New York. Manuel was a candidate for the Texans' defensive coordinator job last offseason. He also interviewed for the same job with the Panthers last year, as well. Manuel would be an interesting choice to replace former defensive coordinator Dan Quinn, having worked for 2 years as Quinn's defensive coordinator in Atlanta. He faces some stiff competition for the job as the list of candidates includes a number of current Cowboys assistants and multiple former NFL head coaches. And you, fan, what do you think about Marquand Manuel playing for Dallas? Leave your opinion in the comments.